Hello and welcome back to Rage Gaming and more Arc Raiders. Today we're talking grenades, all the throwable explosives and utility options that fall under that category. We'll be looking at it in both PvE and PvP examples, but to be clear, this is about grenades, whether that's smokes, arc distraction, or raw damage in some form or another. So this isn't going to cover utility stuff like barricades, placeable mines that aren't grenades, and there's also unique throwables that are their own thing too. And yes, as I was making this video, the update 1.3, the first real balance update for Arc Raiders has dropped, changing the values of things like launcher ammo, deadline mines, weapons like the Venator, and the Hullcracker specifically called out quite a lot. But for this video, there is something that's affected it. This section about explosive damage. We noticed that explosives dealt damage to more parts at once than intended, allowing weapons like the Hullcracker to kill larger drones too quickly. So, we've adjusted explosive damage in general to make it more consistent, rebalancing the damage of the Hullcracker for this change again. They call out the Hullcracker shots needing more precision, but still dealing good damage to the target spot that you're aiming for. Then you get these 3 bullet points. First one says rebalance explosive damage against arc for a more consistent experience, and references the fact that this will matter for larger sized enemies more, like bastions. So what does that mean for grenades? Well, actually, not a massive amount because the explosive radius of most of these grenades is large enough, which is a huge relief. In our testing, things like trigger grenades, snap grenades, the exact same numbers to destroy a bastion are there. But one grenade, the blaze grenade, as we'll get to, did feel this one in regards to arc killing, as we'll talk about when we get there. But with that said, let's get into the tier list. So you can see we've got D through to S because there is definitely a D tier. We'll work our way up from the bottom then. Starting, of course, with D tier, the light sticks. You can get these in a few different colors. It's a throwable light that illuminates the area, which is essentially useless in the sunlight, as you can see, but pretty neat visually in the dark. The only real purpose of this is a bit of fun, and maybe some trolling of other players. So yes, D tier, obviously. Above that, we have the disappointing tagging grenade. You might think this is awesome based on the description. Throw it, after a delay, it tags raiders or arc, letting you briefly track their location. As you can see, it puts a little eye symbol at their lowest point. Naturally, you can see that red eye through walls. Be wary of that fuse time though, it is very easy for a player to avoid that. It's going to be most relevant in tight areas, rooms and corridors, like Stella Montis often is. It lasts 10 seconds total, which is a solid amount of time for a close quarter fight with a raider, but maybe worth a lot less than you'd think. You need utility on that corner after, whether that's nades or just rushing them with the information you have. But in all the cases I've used it, I already knew where they were, like on that corner, which is what allowed me to land the tagging grenade. Then rushing them puts me at a disadvantage because even though I've got that eye on them, they have the third person view to pre-aim swing me. And the best use case of it is going to be trading, which is not ideal. So yeah, I thought it'd be more relevant and effective than it turned out to be, at least in my experience. Moving on then, also in the C tier, we have the gas grenade, which is definitely a lot less impactful than I'd like it to be, but it does serve a purpose and that's why it's at least in C tier. It's a cloud of toxic, green, draining stamina of raiders that stand within it. You may have experienced this now yourself a lot more than before. The Matriarch uses that against you in that fight. Overall, it has its purpose, putting someone in a really bad spot so they can't evade or roll or move, but it doesn't burn through their stamina as quick as you need it to. Fair warning, in this clip, I was trying to get the clips with different grenades. The best use here would be dropping the grenade on him, and then just shooting him while he can't move as much. But you can still see that he's got enough to sprint out of there. So yeah, not that good, but in tight environments, it has some use. So if you find one, it's worth throwing at a raider that you see. That brings us to B tier, where we have most of the grenades. Let's get into it, starting with a new one, the interesting Trail Blazer. A grenade that puts out a flammable gas on its path, causing explosive chain reaction when it ignites. What this means, as you can see, is a sort of canister that goes along a straight line spewing this gas, and then after a small delay, that gas explodes in damage. Now the wiki claims that's 20 damage per instance, and so that might sound weak, but the reality is that it's not one pop of damage, it's a few layered over itself, so it can be pretty nasty area denial or control. Look at this clip. It actually catches me even though I threw it away from myself and I'm standing on this corner. It takes about 50 health thereabouts, all of my light shield, which is a 40% damage reduction. So the damage on a raider is solid, it's just not a one shot either. Against arc, it needs to be a ground arc, and I wouldn't say a leaper is going to be a good target. The best option would be a bastion or bombardier because there's many hitboxes with the legs and body, but in my tests, they don't even flinch. The XP pop-up was pathetic, so you need a good few of these and I don't recommend it. So it's much more relevant in PvP, where you can see as I throw it and catch someone, It cleans out their shield, leaving them vulnerable, and it's an easy follow-up for me as they panic and run away. But here's another reality example. There's a guy in a corner. I throw it at him to cover the corner and his exit, so really he should be caught by it. But the guy has a Venator 4 and doesn't care about me trying to get a clip. He's shooting me for free here. You can see how even in that context, he easily steps out of the explosion before it hits him while I'm down. So the delay between the explosion and gas is rough, giving them time to move out of it if they know what's going on. So best used in tight environments, corridors, buildings, and that kind of thing. Any player that thinks it's just a gas grenade might not be aware of the follow-up explosion, and it does have nasty damage if you get it off on them, but you need to ambush people with it. If you can, it could be devastating against a team in the right environment. But if someone's rushing you, it's not what you want in your hands. It won't help you. So maybe the effect should be wider, and it's certainly better against players than Arc, that's for sure. Right now it's not in the grenade shop for some reason, and I don't have the blueprint so I can't craft more. You get it as a reward, and that's about it, so it's going to be a very rare sight for now. Also in B tier then we have the heavy fuse grenades, which to be fair, do hit hard. 80 damage in a reasonable area. The big downside here is its nature. You throw it and it rolls a little bit, it blinks red and takes a while to blow up, and they're also relatively expensive, each one of them. If you're going to craft one, that's going to require Explosive Station 3 in the blueprint, 2 canisters and 1 explosive compound. Against Arc, the damage is solid, and the fuse time's not too much of a problem as you layer it onto bastions and bombardiers or whatever. But it can miss and it will occasionally, and in PvP, that fuse time is a nightmare. If it goes off, it's going to be devastating, sure, but as you can see, in most cases it just forces them out of a location and misses them entirely, where much weaker, cheaper grenades would have done the same thing. But considering it's in the same tier as trigger nades, which are much better in both forms of content, it's got to be in B tier for me. Also in B tier then is the Snap Blast Grenade, which is simply more reliable than the Heavy Fuse Grenade, but deals less damage and also has a long fuse timer. As an uncommon tier, it's a lot cheaper to craft though, crude explosives and a magnet, no problem. And since it sticks to players, arc, surfaces, you can use it for area denial, catch people out with that, or just throw a load at an arc to finish it. And with its 70 damage potential, it's not even that far behind a Heavy Fuse Grenade, so I think they're pretty fantastic for the cost to value. But they are ultimately a worse and more unreliable trigger grenade, so B tier feels fair. Next up we have another new grenade, the Seeker Grenade. This is a homing grenade that fires like 1 wolfpack explosion at a nearby arc, dealing the damage on impact. As you can see, you can instantly delete things like wasps, snitches, even hornets, which is especially relevant if you don't have the right gun or resource in that moment. It also will work as a great thing to run with a wolfpack because in many cases, you throw a wolfpack and maybe one of the grenades misses, then you just throw 1 Seeker and finish it. For me, it's a great panic button against flyers. And I think if we were starting the wipe with these, they would have been a really useful thing against snitches and such, when you just don't have access to anvils so commonly and so on. I like them, but they serve a pretty specific purpose. Lastly then, in B tier, we have the Shrapnel Grenade, which is basically for PvP against raiders specifically. The idea is that it bursts into razor-sharp fragments after its detonation time. That detonation is a bit long, kind of like a Heavy Fuse Grenade, and it has a 6-meter radius, which is a bit smaller. This is kind of what the shredders explode in, really, but that hurts a lot more. 60 damage a pop, weaker than a Snap Blast by the way, but fantastic for aerial denial and a lot cheaper to make than a Heavy Fuse Grenade. You'd use it for the same purpose, and as you can see, it can catch people out if you put it where they're gonna go, or force them out of a corner they're holding. Bringing 1 or 2 for that specific purpose is great, but yeah, it's much more relevant against raiders than anything. That brings us then to A tier, where I definitely have the Light Impact Grenade, and this is something I strongly recommend you run. Very simply, you throw it and it does a very small AoE, dealing 30 damage. You can throw these, spam them out, which is nice, but the main purpose of this is to force someone off of a corner hold. A third-person angle where they're holding you, smack them, break their shield, whatever, they freak out, they stop holding the corner. You should not continuously throw these, as you can see in some of these examples where I'm desperately trying to get this clip for this video and overusing them. You can also see it used against me though, used for that purpose. We're both holding a corner, I'm trying to get a beat on where the guy is, and then he hits me with not 1 but 2 impact grenades, which is pretty horrifying. Since they're super light and obviously cheap to craft, I love them and run 5 of them anytime I plan to PvP. Now, at this point of the video, this is where I was going to cover the blaze grenades, and I was going to put them in A tier towards the upper end of it. But with the 1.3 patch nerfing them, or rather the concept of explosives in general and the way that they were a bit more overperforming and hitting more parts than maybe they should, blaze grenade seems to be the one that was actually affected by the patch. So where they're actually going to go now is probably at the top of B tier. So before the patch, here's a clip of me killing a leaper using using 2 blaze grenades, and if you're lucky, if you play your cards right, you would kill it in 1. Now, you need to use somewhere between 3 and 4, depending on your use of them. What's happening here? Well, it's pretty simple. The spreading of the fire as you connect the blaze grenade with the target will spread the fire across the unit, but those individual fire ticks were dealing more damage than apparently they should be. Maybe there was some overlapping damage where one fire instance was hitting multiple parts, and because it's a blaze grenade spreading multiple instances of damage and they're all ticking against multiple parts at once, maybe that's part of why it was overperforming. Ultimately, it has made it worse PvE, like DPS wise, but it's still a really reliable tool for just straight throwing the blaze grenade at the target, watching the fire spread, and doing great damage. And if it's standing in fire as well, even better. And all of that doesn't really affect PvP when it comes to raiders, and one of the best case uses of blaze grenades, which is trapping someone in a corner, in an environment, in a room, with fire, dealing ridiculous damage as it burns through their health and shield super effectively. You just gotta be careful you don't burn yourself. So it's still a very solid grenade, but it has less ridiculous DPS potential when it comes to arc after 1.3. For the rest of the video, it will show where the blaze grenade was, but it'll all be right at the final thoughts section. Right, maybe this is controversial. I think people underrate the lure grenade. It makes a noise and sticks to stuff. This means it will stick to walls, floors, other arc, and players too. It generates current aggro. So you can throw this at one arc and all the other arc will attack it, which is really cool. You can stick it to a player to force all the arc in the situation to focus fire on them for its duration. If a Rocketeer is screwing you over or extract, you throw it somewhere and the Rocketeer starts blasting that. If you're dealing with a horrible situation with Shredders, you can force them to AoE in a reliable, avoidable way and then get out of there. It is a fantastic panic button in many scenarios where arc are involved and you want to sort of get their attention off you or onto another player. Just be wary that it generates aggro but won't hold it. So if you throw it and it turns to shoot at the lure grenade, then you shoot the arc, it'll turn back to you. So you need to be passive for like the duration of it to get proper value. But genuinely, they're only greens, they're surprisingly cheap to make, and they come in clutch every time I need one. Also in A tier then, we have both variants of the smoke grenades. For obvious reasons, you break line of sight and cover an area. So great for covering an extract, a path that you're running, someone sniping you and you give yourself cover in the middle of nowhere. It's life-saving. It can also be super deadly in combat where they're using a variety of weapons and you have close range weapons like a Venator or a shotgun or something like that. You throw the smoke, get close, and now you're fighting on your terms to your advantage. It can cause serious chaos and be a real lifesaver. And I think people underrate the little smoke grenade version because yes, the AoE is smaller and lasts less time, but it's so much significantly cheaper and easier to run those every single raid. I bring like 5 every raid, and I'm pretty much every time going to use them at extract to secure the extract, drop it on a body that I want to loot that's a bit exposed. Man, smokes are so fantastic, you gotta get into using them. But now we have S tier, where we gotta talk about grenades that basically do their purpose better than any other grenade. So let's start with the obvious one, the trigger grenade. You throw it and then you manually pop it. This means you could throw 3 back to back, then pop them all at once, causing immense ambush damage to something like a Bastion Bombardier or whatever it is. And it's immensely impactful in PvP too, where it will clean out shields and devastate people at the same time. 90 damage a pop is extremely strong and well worth the investment as it is a rare. They're worth buying and they're certainly worth crafting. And that stands in stark comparison to the heavy fuse grenade, which is of the same tier and relatively similar expenses to craft. I'd rather go with trigger grenade every single time. So yeah, I don't think that's controversial. Let's move on to the next with Showstopper. It's blown me away that people underrate this thing. It is essentially an impact EMP, which is a 2-second stun against players. That's ridiculous, that's GG. Or 10 seconds against an arc. This means you can literally bring Rocketeers out of the sky, letting you mount them, or just destroy them. Understanding how this works is important though. It's an impact, so you throw it, and the moment that it comes in contact with a hitbox, it pops, limiting its AoE more than it might appear. So with a Rocketeer, you need to make sure you hit 2 of the turbines to bring it down, meaning you need to carefully throw it at the face, back, or sides, not the center bottom, not the center top. It won't reach otherwise. Therefore, against Bastion's Bombardiers, you want to take out the legs all at once. but it's also a meta grenade against players, and I don't understand why people don't use it more. It's unbelievable on places like Stellamontis, where you throw it and you get this hard 2-second CC. They're forced into a standing animation, so if they're behind cover, they're now exposed. Because it pops as soon as it comes in contact, it's actually really hard to miss. The only danger is throwing it when you're too close to the player, and it pops and CCs both of you. They're unbelievable, and I would happily have one in my inventory every single raid I ever play in all contexts. So that's definitely S tier. Lastly, obvious one, wolfpack. The best grenade for killing Ark, of course, especially the flyers, where you can really effectively destroy rocketeers and that kind of thing. Admittedly, they're a lot less effective than I'd like them to be against your matriarchs and your queens, because they have a lot of different hitboxes and you want to get that core with specific damage. As it spreads the rockets out, it's going to get a lot less effect, but I mean, it's still going to work great against them. But the best use is definitely rocketeers for that flying value. And if they add any other big flying arc, it's still going to be top tier for them. So that brings us to the end here, where we're looking at the actual list here with the Blaze Grenade in the correct location, thanks to the 1.3 patch. It is interesting that they called out explosives so hard, and it doesn't seem to have affected things nearly as much as you might think. Really, they just made lure grenades slightly better for shredders, and Blaze Grenades a bit less reliable. But overall, you look at the grenades and how they're used still in this patch against arc, big arc, bastions, and bombardiers especially, in relation to the nerfs of the hull cracker, how much more expensive that is to run. So grenades have become even more valuable for killing big arc because their cost to reward is a lot better compared to hull cracker these days. Anyway, I hope this overall look, this in-depth look at all the grenades and my thoughts on how they actually work has been useful to you. If it has, do drop a like, and we'll see if grenades are directly addressed in more specific ways in the future patches. Until next time, I've been Hollow, you've been you, and thanks for watching.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.